moved it over.
I'm going to spin right now. I'll be right back.
So let's just try to figure out the right place to start. As we are on Daf Lamed on the base, there's a Mishnah there that we had started. I had one already today. I split one with Steve Silverstein.
How do you split soup? Is it a split pea soup?
We worked it out somehow. We poured half in one cup and half in another. That was the Jewish solution. These, the same kind, but I brought in 2 pea and 2 mushroom. I think it must have been a mushroom because I only had one of those left. Very good. Yeah, no, it's very good. Hit the spot. Lamed Amid base. So you've gone too far already. You've gone too far. No, that's Tinus. If you look at the types of Tinus. That volume has 4 Masechtas in it, I think. You want to go backwards till you get to Beitsa, the same kind of look to it. Keep going back. I think that in the Rif, maybe, I'm not sure. See at the top it says Rabbeinu Nissim. It's called the Ron normally. So that's the Ron. So it's a Gemora look to it, but that's really the Rif. Then you have Rashi, almost the same as the Rashi we have in our Gemora, and then you have the Ron where the Tosos would normally be. That's the famous Parish of the Ron. So you want to go back to the regular Gemora, not the Ron. Keep turning till you get something that looks like... No, keep going back. See, that's already the Rosh. Or the Moron Shit for all the different commentaries. So keep going till you get much closer to the beginning. Oh, now you're in section 3, close. And then we get to where it says Lamed. Yeah, so I'm on the base, so you can one more until we get to the top. There we go. Okay, so maybe we'll start off, we'll just do a review of the Mishnah to get Jack a little bit on track. And then we'll run it into the section we're doing, which is a bit of a tangent to our Mishnah. The Mishnah talks about using wood that's connected to the sukkah, and the Beitsa that we saw goes into a new subject called using wood from a sukkah on holiday sukkahs. It's 2 different subjects really. The first subject is a regular structure that looks like a sukkah, but it's not really what we would call a sukkah because Rashi says it could be even on Pesach or Shavuos. Any Yom Tov, we're going to have the same question: can you take wood from that sukkah and use it for other things? So the Mishnah starts with that subject. And later the Beitsa is going to go into like a tangential subject, which is a real sukkah, the sukkah that's on the holiday sukkahs. Okay, so if you're up to it, you want to try the Mishnah, Jack? Or wood. Ace can be a tree, but also be just wood, pieces of wood. Right, what's adjacent to the sukkah. So we're going to see the Gemora. Rashi already alerts us in the Mishnah that the Gemora is going to assume that that's talking about 2 parts of the schach. The part that's the lower level of the schach, is sort of part of the structure, and then the extra thickness of the schach, which is not so much part of the sukkah. That's the assumption. So what the Mishnah will be saying theoretically is, don't take from the lower level of the schach wood from the schach itself, that's the lower level, because that's more like the actual roof. But you can take from the upper level, which is sort of the extra thickness of the schach, which isn't really part of the structure, it's just extra that you threw up on top. So that would be the two levels. So later the Gemora is going to reject that, but for various reasons. So in the beginning, the Gemora thought that would make sense, because then it's at least plausible that you would have to be told that you're not allowed to take from the lower level of the schach. Okay, you want to start the Gemora then?
What do you learn?
No, Mishnah is really what's the difference. So again, remember that the Mishnah says you can take from what's adjacent to the sukkah, but you cannot take from the sukkah itself. And we're thinking that means two levels of schach. So that would mean you can take from the adjacent, would be the upper level, but you can't take from the actual sukkah, which is the lower level. So the Gemara says, well, what's the difference? Mashna. Why were you letting me do one and not the other? Because from the sukkah, you told me what? Delo, that you're not allowed to take. What's ostensibly the reason? Right. Ka just means in fact. Satar. Ahala. Which is like the word ohel. Which when we talk about taking apart a building, or building a building, in the words of Chazal, that can also be depicted as a taking apart an ohel, or putting together an ohel. So the word ohel is just a substitute for like a building. Sukkah is a type of a building, so it's also a type of an ohel. It's the same thing in the eyes of Chazal. So the Gemara is saying, what's probably the reason that you told me I can't take from the actual sukkah itself, i.e. the lower level of schach? Because I shouldn't be taking apart the building. Right? That's a malacha that I'm not allowed to do. Even on Yom Tov, I'm not allowed to take apart buildings. Right? I can cook food, but I can't take apart buildings. So that's why I can't do that. But then I don't understand. What's the difference? Because the other part that you told me I can take from, which would be min hasamuchla, that the Mishnah said you can take from, right? That would be the above level, the higher level of schach, according to the Havamina. We don't understand, because nami, that also also should be reckoned as taking apart a building. Why? Rashi explains that because when you put the bottom layer there, you certainly wanted it to be your roof of your structure. However, when you put the top layer on, the Gemora is claiming now that you also had intended to leave it there as part of the roof. So originally we thought maybe it's just like a superfluous part and it's not part of the structure. But the Gemara is now saying that's not really true, is it? It's part of the structure, and you take away that upper level of schach, you're also taking apart the structure. Because you really intended for it to be part of the roof. Okay? So on that, the Gemara says, what could you answer? Why does the Mishnah let you take what's adjacent and not the actual sukkah itself? Because it's not the schach we're talking about. It's really some other parts. What? Yeah, but we thought mina samuch meant the top layer of schach. That the actual bottom layer is the sukkah itself, and what's above that is a samuch. But we're saying now that doesn't make sense. Because why would you let me take away from the upper level? It should be as problematic as the lower level. They're both parts of the structure. So the Gemora answers, you're right. That would have been problematic. That's not what the Mishnah is allowing you to do. What's the Mishnah allowing you to do? Amar Rav Yud Amar Shmuel.
Amar Shmuel, my samuch.
My samuch. What does it mean in the Mishnah when it lets you take from the samuch, from the adjacent? Not like you thought the upper level of schach, but rather samuch. L'defanot. Adjacent to the Dauphin is a wall. Right? So,
talking about the roof near the wall.
No, it's not even the roof. Rashi said it's like pieces of wood that you stood up next to the wall. Let's say you wanted to make the wall thicker. So you stood up more wood next to the wall. Rashi says it's different than the roof, however. The roof, when I lay it there, I really meant for it to be part of the roof forever. So that becomes part of the roof. Whereas these pieces of wood that I'm just putting next to the wall to insulate it or whatever, it's just standing there and it's not really part of the structure. And also I don't intend for it to leave it there forever. Because I know if it's not part of the structure, just standing up next to the wall, it can't remain there forever anyways. So therefore it never really became part of the structure, so that's the answer. The schach on the top became part of the structure. You can't take that away, you're right. But the schach on the side, it's not really schach, it's any boards that are on the side who sort of thicken up the wall, make it more insulated or whatever your reason was, never became part of the actual structure of the sukkah. So therefore when you take it away, you're not really destroying the structure. You're not really destroying the building.
Okay. They're not attached into the walls.
They're not really attached. They're just standing up next to it, like you leaned it up against or something. Maybe even inserted it in the ground a touch. But Rashi says you didn't really weave it into the building. Rashi used a very strange word. Did you weave it in? You didn't weave it in. So weaving is because the process of weaving is where you intertwine something and you make it like part of the fabric, right? So here, if you really meant to make these boards part of the fabric of the sukkah, you would have done something to actually connect them in a very permanent way. You would have nailed them in, bolted them, glued them, whatever. There's other ways of taking two boards and making the outer board part of the inner board. But you didn't do that. So that's why we're now saying, if you have that situation where you have the actual sukkah and now some boards that are just adjacent to the sukkah, they never really officially became part of the sukkah, so then even on Yom Tov you can take them away if you have some other usage for that. That's that's Shmuel's real answer here. And now we have an alternate answer, which is in a way better because we can keep it talking about the schach, like we originally thought it was talking about the schach. According to Rabbi Menashe, we're going to see you could keep it that way. How can you keep it talking about the schach?
Rabbi Menashe Amar.
Right.
Afilu Tema.
You know what that means? Afilu Tema. Even if you say, meaning even if you do end up saying, like we thought originally, that it's Ein Samach L'Defanos, that we're not really talking about those boards that are next to the wall, but rather we're talking about the schach that's on top, we could still explain why you're allowed to take from the upper level and not the lower level. Why? Because Ki Tanya, when did we learn that Hahi, meaning that part of the Mishnah that said you could take away from what's Samuch, and it is talking about schach, he's trying to go back to that original way of thinking, but when do we learn? And only a special kind of schach. That was what? Isuraisa, right? Which is a very funny word, but the root of that word is the word asur. Okay? Now the word asur can have a few meanings. Like we know the word asur means forbidden. But the real root of that word means to be tied up. For example, matir asurim, like we say in the morning. Thank you, Hashem, that you're matir asurim, that you free, right, the ones who have been tied up. It's as if when we're sleeping, we're like tied up in a bundle. And then when we wake up, Hashem frees us from that imprisonment of the bed, as it were. So, even though most of us don't feel like we're bedridden, Baruch Hashem, but usually when I wake up, I feel like I'm attached to the bed. And it takes a while to get out of that bed. I found a little trick, like I have a bar next to me. If I reach over and I grab that bar, I can just like jimmy myself out of my locked in position, but I really feel like I'm a prisoner in that bed. Anyhow,
How come?
I'm so exhausted.
And the jail is called...
Just to get one part moving is the whole trick. What?
The jail is called Yetzirah.
That's right. So for some reason, he seems to reside better in the bed than anywhere else.
Yes.
That's where he takes, I think, a stronghold. Anyhow.
Better the stronghold of the Yetzirah.
Yeah, hopefully we find a trick to overcome him. Sometimes just by moving one little limb, you can get the rest going. So with the schach, we also talk in terms of the being bundled up as isuraisa. Isuraisa, from the idea of being tied up in a bundle. So we've already discussed this once before about the fact that when they harvest things in the field, they bundle it up. Like for example, in the story with Yosef and the brothers, he tells them, you know, my bundle stood up and your bundles all lay down in front of me. That was like symbolic of that, you know, what would later happen, but basically that's how you harvest wheat, etc. You take it, you bundle after you've cut it off, and it's all in like small sheaves. You bundle it. So that's called an aluma, but it's in this Gemora, I think that's what it's referring to. So we're still talking about you can't take from the sukkah itself. That's the normal schach you put on top. But you can take from what samuch, this isuraisa stuff that basically you just didn't have a better place to store the bundles, so you threw it up on top of the sukkah, right? What better place to store things? Because if anything, it's just going to help the sukkah in the meantime to be a more insulated or a more stabilized sukkah. But that's not really your intention. Your real intention in putting the bundles up there is to store it, to keep it hidden maybe from ganavim or whatever, and therefore it's not, again, part of the sukkah. That's the ikar is that we've accomplished in the same way that Shmuel accomplished it by talking about boards that are just standing up next to the wall. Here we've also kept to the schach and the two levels of the schach, but we're saying the top level, you know why it never became part of the sukkah? Because it's bundled up. And it's physically different than the rest of the schach, because it's in bundles and the rest of the schach's not. But also the fact that you left it up there as a bundle, it's a sign that you want to come take it away when it's appropriate. So again, you never made it part of the sukkah. Rashi's lashon, you never were mevatel it to the sukkah. So therefore, okay, you can't take the schach, which is part of the sukkah, the regular schach, but you can take from this, which is adjacent, even though it's still like a layer of schach on the top, but it's a whole different kind of a deal. It's all bundles of whatever, the reeds, etc., and it's not something that became part of the sukkah. So therefore, there's no issue of taking apart a structure. Take it away. Gesund to hate. You're not taking apart a structure. That's why, according to Reb Menashe, you gain on two fronts. You can keep it talking about the schach, which apparently was the original supposition. It's always best to keep that intact. And now he's explained what we are saying, that you could take away from the adjacent schach because it's not at all like the bottom layer. And it's not part of the sukkah, therefore it's not considered taking apart a building. Okay, so now we have a new Beitsa, which is going to end up sparking a whole discussion, which is going to pretty much last the rest of the page. So everything we've learned till now was like step one. Step one was the Mishnah makes sense. We have two possible pshatim in the Mishnah. Either one makes sense, and we are now going to get into a slightly new subject. Okay? Shabbatai, you want to continue then?
Okay. Tonight,
Tanya.
in the Beitsa, the Rabbi Chayev bar Yosef, Kamayei the Rav Yochanan.
Right, so this, I think some people would say, is like, instead of a regular Beitsa, this is a Amora telling over a Beitsa he heard to another Amora. Which we have from time to time, that certain Amoraim were better versed in the Beitsas, and they're very handy people to have around, because then you ask them, did you hear any good Beitsas lately? And then they tell you over one of their handy brises, and that gets the discussion rolling. So that's what pretty much happened over here.
What did he say? Ein notim etzim min ha-sukkah, ele min ha-smuch le. So you only to take wood from the adjacent structure, but not from the sukkah itself.
Right. So far, that was the exact same words as our Mishnah.
Right.
Everything so far is like, okay, not the worst thing to find a brisa that's exactly like a Mishnah, but there wouldn't be a big reason to bring that in the Gemora if it's so far exactly like our Mishnah. But the problem is the next part.
Okay. For Rav Shimon, the matir, and Rav Shimon allows it.
Okay, so now what is he saying? The Tana Kama said it's usher to do what?
Not to take
from
this adjacent structure.
No, you said you could take from the adjacent.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. You can't take from the sukkah.
From the sukkah itself. According to one pshat, sukkah itself meant the bottom layer of schach, and according to the other pshat, it meant the walls. Either way, in either case, it was because it was part of the structure. So we came along and said, oh, but you could take from the adjacent because it's not part of the structure. But the main thing that he's going to focus on now is the part that you said we're not allowed to do. We're not allowed to take from the actual bottom layer of schach or the walls because they're the actual structure. And you're taking apart a structure. It's a malach on Yom Tov that's not for the sake of eating. It's asur. But then it comes along Rabbi Shimon, and he said he's mater. So the supposition is, we said you can't take from these parts of the sukkah because it's taking apart a structure. Sounds like Rabbi Shimon doesn't care about that. Which almost sounds impossible because A, we have a whole list of the malachas in Shabbos, and this is one of the malachas, one of the 39. And it doesn't seem to be one of the ones you would permit, according to anyone, for the sake of eating.
It's like deconstruction.
Yeah, so therefore,
Taking apart.
yes, taking apart. There's no, now you could say, but I needed the wood for cooking. Okay, but it's still too many steps prior to the cooking to allow you to do it on Yom Tov. So we're going to have a big problem explaining why Rebbe Shimon would let you do it. Right? That's how the Gemora is going to object to this. How can he allow you? Nobody would allow this. So we're going to see that. The Gemara's going to, but before we do that, we're going to quote the whole brisa, because that's the style of the Gemara. When it brings part of a brisa, it brings the entire brisa. And the second part we're not going to really get to till later on the page after the two dots. It's going to be a whole separate discussion. But still, pay attention now, because when we bring it up later, it should be fresh in your mind.
So you just read the first part of the brisa.
Yeah. Now the second part says,
but everyone agrees that in the sukkah that you use on the chag,
and it's during the chag, because you could have had the sukkah used on the chag after the chag, but no, during the chag.
It's not allowed, not permitted.
Right. So that means even though I just had Rabbi Shimon saying you could use the sukkah, right, wood, the actual sukkah wood, however we'll understand that, we have to understand that. He said you could do it, right? But shaving means, but he agrees that you can't use it if what? It's the actual sukkah that we use on sukkahs. As opposed to what we were talking about before. When we were talking about a sukkah before, and it was during a chag, but it wasn't sukkahs. It was Pesach or Shavuos. Right? Because this Masechta is called Maseches Yom Tov. Maseches Beitsa is nicknamed Maseches Yom Tov. That's what this Masechta is. So we have three Yomim Tov. We have Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkos. So when we talk about a sukkah over here, don't assume it's talking about Chag HaSukkos. Really, as Rashi says, it's really not talking about Chag HaSukkos.
It's a sukkah.
It's a sukkah-like structure, like a little hut that you have in your backyard that you like to go back there and get a refreshing, airy meal. Right, not stuffed in the house. So it's that kind of a structure. You still have to know how to deal with it. Can you take from the structure? Can you not take from the structure if you want some extra wood? So we're saying you can't take from the structures. For some reason, Rabbi Shimon said it was okay, but the Gemara is now saying, but according to Rabbi Shimon, that he said it was okay, but he agrees it's not okay if it's actually the sukkah of sukkahs on sukkahs. Yeah, on sukkahs. No, we're going to see actually the truth of the matter is even during Chol HaMoed it's going to be asur. What we're saying now, even though it's not obvious, because could be just talking about Yom Tov, but it's the way the Gemora is going to explain it, why this sukkah, why the wood is usher, it really applies all of sukkahs, the truth of the matter is. But, good point. At least on Yom Tov, and maybe even Chol Hamoed.
You talk about a sukkah of sukkah.
Yeah. The Gemara is going to say a special reason why that wood on sukkahs is a bigger problem than any other time. Okay? But, in the meantime, the last little leg of the Beitsa.
Im hatana ela, hakol ifnei hatano. So if you made a tanai, if you made a condition
right.
on this particular thing, then it holds. Then all
everything is going to be according to his condition.
Tanai, yeah.
Right? In other words, you have to word it, and especially if you don't word it properly, it's not going to help you. But if you worded it right, if you word the condition right, when you make your sukkah, you make a little condition right before you finish off the sukkah, you kind of preempt the problem. That's what the Beitsa seems to be saying. That whatever problem the wood had, if you make a special condition before you finish it off, basically you preempt that problem. And you will be able to use it on Yom Tov and on Chol Hamoed. Okay, so we have to discuss what kind of condition are we talking about? What exactly did he say to make a condition? What's going on? But whatever it is, it's going to be in a Gemora much later on, right? First, the Gemora attacks the first part of the Beitsa, and not the first part, because that was already like our Mishnah. We already discussed our Mishnah. It's the Rabbi Shimon part that said, "Oh, you're not allowed to take from the sukkah." Yes, you are allowed to take from the sukkah. That part's going to be a problem right away.
Sorry, say that again? The last part?
There's really four parts of the Beitsa, if you think about it. There's the first part, which is exactly like our Mishnah, which now we'll call him the Tanakama. Then we have Rabbi Shimon saying, no, that thing that you just said is asr, I'm saying is mutter, which was the actual part of the sukkah, wood from the actual sukkah. Then you have the third section, which is that if it's a different kind of a sukkah, not the one we were talking about now, which is a regular structure, like a sukkah-like structure, but on Pesach or Shavuos, if you'd be talking about the real sukkah, what you and I call sukkah, on Chag HaSukkos, then even Rabbi Shimon agrees you can't take from the wood from the sukkah.
So why does it say the Rabbi Shimon material?
Because that was in the second part of this Beitsa. The second part said, on Pesach and on Shavuos, that my compatriot, the Tanakama, said I can't take from the sukkah itself. I'm telling you can take from the sukkah itself.
So how would we, if we're just reading the Gemora, if we're reading the Beitsa like this, how would we know that?
Because he's only going to be matir. He doesn't need to come to be matir what was already mutter. He's only coming to add an opinion about something that was said contrary to him. So what was contrary? Who said something's forbidden?
He says that everyone, he agrees that in the sukkah on the chag, it's not
That's
allowed.
shoving. That's the third section. Which part's bothering you? The section number 2 or section number 3?
I see the two words here. I see Vashavin. Right. So
Right before that was the matir. So
right.
section number 2, he's saying what you said is asr, i.e. the sukkah itself, I'm saying is mutter. Section number 3, but even what I just said is is mutter. Now I'm shaveh to you that I'm saying it's asr if it's a sukkah on the sukkah.
Right. But then he says afterwards material.
No, that's the matir doesn't come after that.
No, it doesn't?
No, your eyes are playing tricks on you.
He says, okay.
No, I know what you're doing. You're going on with the Gemora because the Gemora is repeating part 2 of the Beitsa to analyze it. We've already had the Beitsa. Now the Gemora wants to analyze the new part, which is Rabbi Shimon, Matir.
And we know it's the Gemora because it's in Aramaic.
Not just that, but like you're saying, it's a repetition of what we just had a minute ago. That's very fishy, that we're having a repetition. Why would he say the same thing again? And it's also out of place. We just said shavim, which means everybody's in agreement. Why would you suddenly have Rabbi Shimon Matir?
Exactly.
So you say to yourself, look, it looks like a repetition, and it doesn't make sense if it's not a repetition. So if it's a repetition, what's it doing there? The answer is the Gemara is now going back and discussing it. So it's like the scientist taking a small sliver and putting it in a special slide and slipping it under the microscope. We had a Beitsa with 4 sections. Now we're re-quoting section 2 in order to start to deal with it. It's like taking and putting it on a slide and putting it under the microscope. So we end up repeating the part that's now going to focus our attention.
Okay, that's good.
So it's not a repetition, it's just for the sake of clarity, that we're now going to focus on this statement. So it's almost like an Amar Mar. The Gemora will sometimes say, the master said, blah, 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 let's discuss that. Okay, so the Gemora says, basically, it said a moment ago, Reb Shimon Matir, in part number 2 of the Beitsa, which we never saw before. We saw the first part of the Beitsa in the Mishnah. The second thing is a whole new ballgame. What does it mean he's Matir? So the Gemora immediately says, how could he say that? V'ha, but behold, it's impossible that he could have said that because behold, Satar Allah. Now this is the 3rd time we've used that phrase. We're very, very familiar with this phrase already. Satar Allah.
Destroying this
taking
structure.
apart the structure. Now we already said everybody's got to be against that. Right? That was like a given. You can't take apart a structure. Even on Yom Tov, when we are very lenient with a lot of things, but not with this. So just like the Gemora before said, how can that be? You're taking apart a structure. Meaning you can't take apart a structure. So now we're just saying the same thing with Rabbi Shimon. How could he seem to be saying he's materit, but he's taking apart the structure? How could he do that? He can't be doing this. Something's wrong.
So by saying this, the Gemara is actually saying, look, he's not talking about the
That's got to be the follow-through. He can't be talking about that. Because it's basically like saying, could he really be saying that? But everybody knows it's usher. So therefore the only conclusion must be he's talking about something slightly different.
So even if you make it tonight, it's still awesome.
We haven't talked about the Tanai yet. No. Tanai was when we're talking about a regular sukkah on sukkahs. But again, there's 4 parts to the Beitsa. Part 1 was like our Mishnah, a regular sukkah on Pesach and Shavuos. And it told you could take from what's summed to that sukkah, but not the sukkah itself, because that's taking apart a structure. Part 2 of the Beitsa was what? Rabbi Shimon Matir.
What about Rabbi Hillel Mashmul?
Nope, that was to answer a kasha that the Gemora had asked on our Mishnah. How can the Mishnah's like you take from the samuch? But that's also taking apart a structure. Even the top schach is taking part of the structure to let you take that. So we said, no, it's not talking about that. It's talking about samuch l'defanos. But that's all before we got into the Beitsa. Now we start a whole new section of the Gemora. The Beitsa is a whole new section. It's like we finished with the Mishnah. Mishnah's fine. Mishnah's okay. We had Shmuel's pshat, Rav Menashe's pshat. Either way, we have a good pshat in the Mishnah. But now the Gemara is saying, okay, now that that's okay, let's go a little bit deeper. There's a Beitsa that deepens everything. That goes into the subject much more deeply. It's like chapter 2. Okay? Now the Beitsa has 4 sections. Okay? Can you see where the Beitsa starts?
Tanya Rabbi Hillel.
Kamei de Rabbi Yochanan, and then starts the Beitsa. And now the Beitsa starts with something that looks very much like our Mishnah. So step 1 of the Beitsa is exactly like our Mishnah. You can take from the Samach, you can't take from the Sukkah itself. Comes along Rabbi Shimon and says, you can take from the Sukkah itself. Now the Gemara is asking on that, what does that mean? You take from the Sukkah itself, you're taking apart a structure. That's a malacha called soiser. That's one of the 39 malachas. Why would you have a heter to do that on Yom Tov? How is that considered to be mutter? Says the Gemora. Now, just like before we had Shmuel coming to answer up the kasha, now we have Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak coming to answer up the kasha. Do you want to try it, Sruli?
Yes. Tanya Rabbi Hillel.
No. Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak.
Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. Hacha v'sukkah v'feles askin. Here we're talking about a case where sukkah fell down.
Oh. Right? It has already fallen down. So what do we gain by saying that?
Which means that it's no longer a sukkah anymore.
So therefore what? It's not a problem of
Soiser.
soiser, right? There's no more structure. You can't accuse me of taking apart a structure if there's no more structure. It's fallen down already. As they say in Yiddish, far fallen.
Perfectly.
This is where the expression was born and raised. Use the pun. So now we're saying that explains very well why Reb Shimon would say it's mutter. Okay? Because there's no problem anymore of taking apart a structure because there is no structure. So what are you taking apart? Nothing. So that explains what Rabbi Shimon says is mutter, right? However, now the problem will be, why did the Tanna Kama say it's usur? What does he have against taking part of the wood of the sukkah?
So in the second,
We've answered one problem, we created a new problem. That's what the Gemora is.
so the second part where it says that Shimon Matir
Yeah,
is referring to the
the sukkah
skach.
that's fallen down.
Ah,
No, the actual
earlier.
walls.
Yeah,
Let's take the shot that we had before of the walls and what's next to the walls.
Right.
So he's saying you can take from the walls. Right? If you go with that shot that we're talking about the walls. If you say we're talking about the schach, he said you can actually take from the bottom layer of the schach. But okay, let's use Shmuel's shot. That's the easiest shot right now. The Mishnah was saying, and the Beitsa started off by saying you could take from the adjacent boards that were leaned up against the sukkah, but you can't take from the actual walls of the sukkah. Came Rabbi Shimon and said, yes, you can take from the walls of the sukkah. Said the Gemora, how can you take from the walls of the sukkah? You're destroying a structure. That's a malacha. And that shouldn't be mutter on Yom Tov because it's not one of the ones that normally would be mutter on Yom Tov. So the Gemora says, you're right. It's not called taking apart a structure. You know why? Because it already fell down. Okay, so now we have two questions. One, what's the chiddush? If it already fell down, of course you can take from it. We have another question, though. If it already fell down, why would the Tanna Kama be against taking from it? We thought the whole problem was taking apart a structure, but now everybody has to agree there's no structure here.
Wasn't designated.
Oh, so we're going to have to create a new thing now. We're going to have to say it wasn't talking about taking apart a structure. We made a mistake. What we're really talking about over here is what? A problem of muksa. And why would Rabbi Shimon let you take these boards that might have been considered muksa? Rabbi Shimon, l'taimei. He's going according to his own reasoning, his famous shita, as we call it. Right? He's well known for his shita in this area. What? Delay slay muksa. He what? He what? He doesn't hold a muksa. Now the truth is, we had before, on the previous page, for example, muksa machmas chisaron kis, certain kinds of muksa that you're not allowed to use because it's very expensive and you're afraid it'll get ruined. Rabbi Shimon agrees to that. Right? We had cases of cedar or lumber that he wouldn't let you use because nobody wants to lose their most expensive item. So there are things that even Rabbi Shimon holds are muksa. That's a bit of a misnomer to say Rabbi Shimon doesn't hold a muksa. Not only that, we're going to see later on, in a few more lines of the Gemora is going to admit that if it wasn't a wobbly sukkah, if it was a very strong, sturdy sukkah, even Rabbi Shimon would agree you can't take it. Because he does hold of some kinds of muksa. It's just, generally we say, oh, Rabbi Shimon doesn't hold of muksa. Because that's like a famous shita that he holds of. But the truth is, when you look a little bit closer, you see, that's a general statement about Rabbi Shimon, but it's not the full picture. There are a few types of muksa that he does hold of. But generally speaking, he doesn't hold a muksa. So how will that help us? Because till now, this was a standing wall. I couldn't take from it. Everybody agrees. If it's a standing wall, to take from that wall would be taking apart a structure. Oh, and so because of that, for sure, it's muksa, right? It's something I can't touch, right? But when it falls down, what happens? Do I say, oh, now that it's fallen down, I can now take it? If you hold a muksa, you say, when do we lock things into the label of being muksa? At sundown, right? As soon as Yom Tov begins, or Shabbos begins, those who hold a muksa say, we now label it, right? Now it has that label on it, pea soup, right? Muksa. So, and now even if something changed, the situation changed, Now it's no longer part of a structure. So my whole reason for not using it at the beginning of Yom Tov is because it would have been taking apart a structure. That doesn't exist anymore, but it's still got labeled. The label is still there, muksa. That's what the Gemora means. Rabbi Shimon doesn't hold to that label. He never labels things like that. Because he's very fluid. Right? It's like the Rabbi Shimon who wrote the Zohar. Right? He's the same Rabbi Shimon, by the way. It means he's much more into the deeper stratum of the people's thoughts. You say, no, the guy would not have labeled it muksa if it has a possible usage. Why should he do that? Why should, right? Especially, Jews never like to throw anything out. Why should I just label it as muksa, so I'm not going to use when it has a possible usage? So, that's the general idea of Rabbi Shimon. That he'll allow you to pick up the wood now that it's fallen, because there's no Isser anymore. The Isser of muksa, he doesn't hold to those kind of labels, generally speaking. So therefore, now that there's no Isser of taking the structure apart, it's a nice piece of wood. Why not? Right? So therefore, according to the Gemora, that's why he could be matir. Why does the other one hold you can't? Why would the other Tanakama say you can't? Because that would ostensibly be his archenemy, so to speak, Rabbi Yehuda, who does hold a muksa. And he would say when Yom Tov came in, because of the problem of you can't take a structure apart, at that moment we labeled it muksa. And according to him, that label sticks. And therefore, when it fell down, that doesn't help you. Because now there's no longer an issue of taking it apart, but that doesn't help you anymore. Because it's already been labeled as shkia.
Label shkia as muktzah.
I don't know where the heater is. What used to be right here, and I've turned it on. I'm going to put it on.
I
I think they put it away.
don't think we need it.
Yeah, they put it here. Plug it in.
I think I don't really need it.
You sure?
Yeah. I'm not
Sounds
cold.
like you're still a little bit sensitive. And by the way, so I think it's going to be time for you to dive in a minute.
Yeah.
You sure? Anyone else want it plugged in?
Good.
Okay.
Get on this like Okay.
Maybe you just want some more hot drink, like hot teas, whole box of teas over there. Just telling you the truth.
We should have rather got chicken soup, huh? And we have mushroom soup.
It's very good. Whatever it is, it's very good.
Nice, yeah.
I endorse your choice.
We'll take a minute or two break.
It's about the Coca-Cola.
Go on. One down. Okay. So, we'll see you soon.
Okay,
wanna
enjoy.
see
Do you need a sitter?
You want to see?
Yeah.
These art scroll on the top there.
Here?
Little shelf.
Yeah.
Oh, let's go back to where we were when Jack was here before.
A lot of these things that they put in the sukkah are actually edible.
Yeah, well, a lot of them are. It's saying whatever you could use, let's say even the sheets. Let's say I want to use the sheet for my bed, Instead of dragging out the linens and doing it that way, let me just use what's out there already. So according to this Beitsa, you shouldn't do that because it's already part of the sukkah. And if it's already part of the sukkah, it's part of the hektish.
Part of the walls.
Putting up like like sheets as like wallpaper, pretty wallpaper. But since it's still sheet, you could really use it as a sheet theoretically. But that's what the Beitsa is telling you can't, unless you make a tanai, which we are going to get into later. That's Rosh. Okay, let's go back to where we were. So before we had this case where we said we're talking about a sukkah nofelis. It fell down, already. And Rabbi Shimon is allowing you to take from the wood because he, generally speaking, will allow you to use anything that's properly usable on Shabbos or Yom Tov. He doesn't label things at the beginning of Shabbos or Yom Tov muksa and then tell you that no matter what you can't use it anymore. He is very flexible. If it fell down and now you could use it because there's no issue of taking apart a structure, so then according to Rabbi Shimon, he'll let you use it. However, the Gemora now tries to tell you that it's Rabbi Shimon according to on a position which he held elsewhere. That's usually what the Gemora means. When it says so-and-so is litaimeh, according to his reasoning, usually that means we have him on record somewhere else as a more sort of famous shita, and that could be applied here as well. Now, where is the more famous shita of Rabbi Shimon that we say, oh, Rabbi Shimon doesn't hold a muk? So we had this at the beginning of the Masechta, but ironically it was in Rashi over there. Rashi brought this down as being in Maseches Shabbos, actually. Our Gemora now brings it down for us to see as well. Okay, so we're on the line that starts with the word delay slay muksa, right? We had just said Rabbi Shimon doesn't hold a muksa, and now the Gemara tries to bolster that up. How do we know that Rabbi Shimon doesn't hold a muksa? And that's why he'd like to use these boards of the sukkah that fell down, Desanya, because he learned it in a Beitsa. Want to try it, Jack?
Desanya, mutter, hashemen.
Now, it looks like the word mutter. That's an honest mistake. But in this case, with knowing that the Nekudot could be differently depending on if you're in different contexts, here it should be pronounced motar, or if you're of that type who pronounce your subs as subs, mosar. From the word miyutar, like extra. So it's basically saying mosar hashemen, the leftover shemen. So you imagine like a person on Hanukkah, it happens all the time. And I happen to use also shemen candles. My wife likes to light them on Shabbos, so I often have this on Motzi Shabbos or the next week. It didn't all burn away, right? I put in the wick, I put in the oil, but it didn't all burn away. There was a bunch left over.
What do you do with it?
I usually throw it away just because I find it doesn't burn as well the next week. But the truth is, for those people, let's say, especially in those days that were very poor, it would be very important to save that shemen. If you couldn't use it for lighting, you can use it for eating. Use a shemen zayis or something, right? Right. So that's what you would want to do. So let's continue. Mosar hashemen.
Mosar hashemen. Shebanar.
Ner. Shebaner. That's in the ner. Now, ner here doesn't mean what we mean. We say ner, a candle. It means the container.
Of the oil.
Right. Like when you take a cup and you put oil in, and then you put a wick on top of that. So left inside of that was a bit of oil. Or, right, which is normally translated as a plate. A ka'ara is a plate. But it could also be like a bowl, a large bowl. So therefore, if you happen to light a whole bowl full of shemen, it could also have leftover at the bottom. So what do you do? So the first shita says, Asur, you cannot use it, even though now you say, why not? There's no, again, the fire went out, so to take from that is not considered to be putting out a fire, like normally you can't take from it because it's the fuel of the fire. And there's no fire there anymore, why can't I take that? Because it's muksa. So this shita will turn out to be Rabbi Yehuda, who we said he holds the muksa, which in this case means when Shabbos or Yom Tov begins, because it's usher to take from it, because to do so would be considered extinguishing a fire, therefore it's labeled immediately muksa, and the whole rest of Shabbos, even if it later becomes accessible, and there's no isser putting out a fire anymore because the fire already went out, he holds, that's it, it's still usher. It's labeled, right? It's already been labeled.
Okay.
But
Rabbi Shimon Matir.
Oh. This is the famous Rabbi Shimon, who we say does not hold a muksa. Therefore, as long as the flame's gone out, and there's no issue anymore of having the problem of the malacha putting out a fire by taking the shemen. Now to take the shemen will just be a matter of, was it usher from before and does it remain usher because of muksa? He doesn't hold of that. He doesn't hold of that labeling process, seemingly. Okay? So our Gemora is saying, just like we found Rabbi Shimon over there letting you use the shemen after the flame went out, and there's no Isser Malacha anymore, it's just a Shaila of Muksa. He doesn't hold of that problem of Muksa. It doesn't get labeled. So here also, if the sukkah fell down, he would let you use the wood, and that's what it means in the Beitsa, where Rabbi Shimon is matir the wood, even the wood of the actual sukkah. Because talking about after it fell down, and the only issue is it Muksa, and he doesn't hold of that, so therefore it's fine. Now the Gemora asks, but wait a minute. Me, dummy. Right? I always used to love this when I was first learning Gemora. It's like the Gemora is telling you you're a dummy. Right? That's how you always feel when you learn.
Who's the dummy?
Right? So let's remember though, the word me in Aramaic is just a question mark. So it's not the word who, it's just making the next word into a question. So dummy is like the word domeh, which means similar. Instead of making a statement that it is similar, it makes it into a question. Is it similar? Meaning you just compared taking the wood of this sukkah that fell down to where we know Rabbi Shimon lets you take the oil once the light went out. But is it really similar? Me, dummy, is it really similar? And now the Gemara is going to explain why we don't think it's similar. In other words, we're going to support the kasha. You know why we don't think it's similar? Because really, if you think about it,
Hatam,
which will be what?
Adam Yoshev.
Hatam is what? Over there, it's like the word sham, right? You see in the middle of the word hatam is the word sham, with the theory that the shin and the tav are interchangeable. So where would the there be? The far away case. What's the far away case? The case of the shemen and the ner. That's the case we schlepped in to try to prove our point. So that's from way over there. As opposed to the case of the sukkah is here. This one we started with, the case of sukkah is here. So we say, no, don't compare them because over there, by the shemen case, you know why he allowed you to use the shemen? Because Adam
Yoshev.
Umitzapeh.
He sits in there and
He expects, or in other words, he awaits, and he says to himself,
Eimatai.
right, Eimatai
When?
Tichaber.
When is it going to go out?
When is it going to go out? Nero. Which we said it doesn't necessarily have to be that he wants it to go out, but he knows it's probably going to go out. So in the back of his mind, he's thinking, hey, I can't wait for it to go out, and I'll be able to use that shemen for my salad dressing. But on the other hand, the case that you wanted to compare it to, which would be hacha, which is what? Here we're dealing with a case of a sukkah that fell down.
When is this sukkah going to fall?
Now, do you read that as a statement or as a rhetorical question?
Rhetorical question.
A rhetorical question. We're trying to show they're not really similar because do you really think a guy sitting
waiting for
a sukkah to fall down? So even if you say it doesn't mean waiting for it to happen, but expecting it to happen also. A normal sukkah, you don't think it's going to fall down. Most people build a sukkah in a way that's going to stand. They don't build it and say, oh my gosh, I'm sure this is going to fall down any second. So therefore the Gemora is saying, look, in the one case of the shemen, you know why Rabbi Shimon let you use it? Because in the back of your mind it was going to it had an imminent use.
Yeah.
You knew it's going to go out at some point or other, and you knew it's going to be available. So in the back of your mind, when Shabbos came in, you're already thinking about using that shemen.
Yeah.
But did you ever start to think about using your wood of your sukkah? No. Because you start sukkahs thinking your sukkah is going to stand. Not that it's about to fall. So therefore, how can you compare the two? And how can you tell me that Rabbi Shimon would think you could use the wood after it fell down because you've been thinking of using it the whole time anyways? No. A person doesn't think that way. A normal person who's a normal sukkah is thinking, I hope it stands the whole of sukkahs. So the Gemara is therefore saying, I don't like your explanation. I don't like you telling me that we're talking about a sukkah that fell, and the reason why Rabbi Shimon lets you take the wood is because he doesn't hold a muksa. And your whole comparison is to the case over there by the shemen. That's not a good comparison. They're very different cases. In one case he expects it to happen, in another case he doesn't usually expect it to happen. So how can you compare? So the Gemara answers, you're right.
So you can't compare the two cases.
You can't.
Amar Nachman.
Bar Yitzchak.
Hacha, the sukkah,
Ra'u'ah.
Askina. Here we're dealing with a sukkah which is competent, right?
Right. Well, like a weakened form or a broken kind of a sukkah, which is, we said wobbly. We kept. It's easier to call it a wobbly sukkah in English, right? So therefore, it's poorly built, some kind of structural problem it has right from the beginning. So now we've created a situation where the sukkah that we're talking about here is comparable to the shemen and the nair now. Because now we can say in both cases he's not hoping it happens, but he's certainly expecting that it might happen. So therefore what? We can say confidently that from yesterday, from before Yom Tov, what was in his mind? Da'atei Iluyeh. His mind was upon it. Right? And that's the idea. If a person thinking of using something, Rabbi Shimon says, look, if a guy had in the back of his mind to use something, who am I to say he can't use it? If he thought he's not going to use it, then I can tell him he's already designated this as non-usable. So now we're kind of admitting, if it would be a regular sukkah and it would have fallen down, you're really right. Rabbi Shimon would never have let you use that wood because it's not something you would have expected to use. So in your mind, it wasn't on it from the day before. But a wobbly sukkah, very similar to the case of the shemen and the nair, where you expect it to go out at some point and leave a bit of shemen over. So therefore, your mind is already on it from before. So therefore, Rabbi Shimon will let you use it, but only if your mind was on it from before. That's what we're saying now. Okay. Now we had another little bit in the Beitsa. This is all to explain the Beitsa, why Rabbi Shimon let you take from the sukkah itself. Turns out it's only talking about a sukkah that fell down, and even that, it's only talking about a sukkah that fell down that you were expecting it to fall down, basically. But a regular sukkah that's still standing, for sure not. Even Rabbi Shimon would never let you take it, because you're destroying the structure. And even if it fell down, if it's a regular sukkah, you weren't thinking to use this. You never thought it would be available, so therefore even Rabbi Shimon would say you can't take it. When does Rabbi Shimon say you can take it? If it's already fallen down, and it's the type of sukkah that you were actually expecting it to fall down at some point. So therefore we can say that in the back of your mind you were thinking maybe you'll use it, so therefore it's part of your repertoire, as it were. Not books. According to Rabbi Shimon. But according to Tanakama, that's not enough. According to Tanakama, the fact that at the time when Yom Tov started, it was usher to you, it was off limits because of the isser of structural thing, therefore that label right at that moment is muksa, and that label doesn't go away. That's true. That part we said before is true. Now we understand the Tanakama saying no, even after it fell down. Rabbi Shimon says yes, but in a specific case. Now the other parts of the Beitsa were, the parts 3 and 4 had to do with a regular sukkah on sukkahs. A regular sukkah, what we call sukkah on sukkahs, we said you can't take from the walls. Even Rabbi Shimon, meaning, according to what we're saying now, even if it did fall down, I don't care. Even if it was a wobbly sukkah, I don't care what it was. You can't take from it. That's what I was saying. Everybody agrees to that. That a sukkah that's part of the mitzvah becomes a new thing. It's off limits. So the Gemora says, someone else want to read? Sruli,
Yep.
Can we entice you to read?
Yep. He's been working very hard too, so we're trying to focus on more of this. The making it time as well.
I understand.
Put my head down for 10 minutes.
I hold the power naps. I'm a big advocate of power
Try a
naps.
bit more, sleep a bit more.
No, I think at 5:25 you can sleep, or 5:20 even. Right now, let's try to push ourselves for 10 minutes.
It's all right for tomorrow, but to take a 10-minute nap.
That's why I'd like you to get back at 3:30, 3:35. You can have that power nap before the shir. Okay, let's go from the 2 dots. Umi
Me masna
Mahani.
tonight. And so the Gemara just said I agree with Shimon, and Rabbi Shimon agrees. The Sukkah says also. It says if you made it tonight, so it goes according to a condition you made.
Right, so meaning if you made a special kind of tanai, you could bypass the isser and you could use the wood of the sukkah. More says, does that really help?
Me masna tonight, can that condition help? Amar of Sheshes, Shimon HaYeshiva.
Yeah, there's a ha-amar. What does that hey do? The ha-amar.
Question?
Yeah. Like how can you say it works? Didn't Rav Sheshes say in the name of Rabbi Akiva that what?
Does
Minayin.
Minayin, from where do we know that La'atza Sukkah Sh'asur N'kol Shiva?
that the wood of a sukkah, anything that's connected to a sukkah, like we'll see later, even anything connected to a sukkah, even the grapes that you hang on the sukkah, it's all usr. But we know that. We know that's true. That's not a chiddush. We know it's usr. But from where do we know? Where's the pasuk in the Chumash that teaches us that point? Minayin. How do we know that that's true? We know it's true. How do we know it's true? The answer is, according to Rabbi Akiva, Shenamar. Oh.
7 days
the sukkah should be to Hashem. The sukkah should be to Hashem. So that makes it sound like it's hektish, says Rashi. When something's for Hashem. Do you know that when you consecrate something, you know how you say it? You say Zela Hashem. That's how you say it. Right? You say that this sheep should be La Hashem. That's how you consecrate something. So here it's saying the Sukkah La Hashem, like the Torah consecrated it.
Just a quick question. The eights, was there a lammet in front of it?
Where? So Minayin means from where do we know?
Yeah.
In English we would say from where do we know that? But basically from where do we get the halacha for the sake of this? Where's the source for this halacha? That's how we even say it really like that in English. Where's the source for this halacha? Olama can mean to or for. Like lech lecha doesn't mean go to yourself, it means go for yourself, for your own sake. And Rashi says you're going to benefit from going to Eretz Yisrael. So the lama can often mean for the sake of. Some people say it's even short for the word bishvil. It's like the lamed of the last letter of bishvil. If you look at Rashi says bishvil reishis. Rashi says bishvil reish. They're the bases. The bases instead of bishvil. Even the lamed is a little bit like before the word bishvil. Okay, so where do we get the source for this following halacha? That the sukkah is the Atzei sukkah is also all 7 days. Yes, so that's how Rashi says it. It becomes hektish, right? So therefore, this pshat in the Gemora is that Rabbi Akiva is learning from La Hashem. Sukkah is La Hashem. The sukkah becomes like a hektish. But we find that there's another shita, Tanya.
Tanya also
Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer. Ala Chagiga.
We know just like the Shem Shemayim falls upon the Chagiga, Kach Chal Shem Shemayim al Sukkah. So too the same name of heaven falls upon the sukkah.
Right. So name of heaven falling upon means it becomes hektish, right? When you have a korban, we say that it becomes part of Hashem's property, as it were. So therefore, that is like the Shem Shemayim being put upon that object. So here we say, just like we know that happens to a korban, to a chagig, which is like a korban, it happens also to the Atzei Sukkah. But how do we know that? How in the world do we know the secret that the walls of the sukkah become mamish like a shtik korban?
That's why I don't want to sleep with it. That's why I don't want the heater on. Because if I have the heater on, I'll be more sleepy.
I agree. I don't like heaters myself. But I know there's some people, when someone started sneezing uncontrollably, I thought maybe that was our only answer. Okay, so that's a legitimate question. The answer is tough lamed. What's tough lamed? Not tough love.
Talmud Lomar.
Talmud Lomar. What does it mean? The Torah teaches us a pasuk which is the source of that halacha. What's the pasuk? Right. So he's quoting the same pasuk. The only difference is it's not because of La Hashem per se. He's making a hekish. He's comparing Chagiga to Sukkah. What gives him a right to compare Chagiga to Sukkah? Because at the beginning of the pasuk it says Chag HaSukkos. That's like putting the Chag, which is representative of Chagiga, next to Sukkah, which is like the Sukkah. It's a hekish. And that's how we get a comparison. When two things are juxtaposed in the Torah, that's to teach us a comparison. And we say, that, what does that teach us? That Chag LaHashem. And in this case, Chag doesn't mean the holiday, it means the Chagiga. Right. So too, the Sukkah is going to be LaHashem. So that's a way of learning that just like the Chagiga becomes Hektish, so the Sukkah becomes Hektish. Okay? It's a slightly different limud than Rabbi Akiva's limud before, but it's the same pasuk, the same concept. Okay? So what did we just prove? The Sukkah becomes Hektish. So how can you say in the Beitsa that if you make a Tanai, you can stop that from happening? How can I stop it from happening? It's like saying I don't want the Sefer Torah to be Hektish. I don't want the Sefer Torah to be Kodesh. Sefer Torah is holy. You don't have any say in the matter. If the Sukkah is holy because of this pasuk, how do you have a say in the matter? So the Gemora says that we're right. We're right. It's not talking about a regular, it's not talking about a Sukkah. Rav Menashia.
Menashia parade the Rava. Menashia, the son of Rava, says Seifa.
The Seifa. And you know what the Seifa is? Where we say a Tanai can help. But that Seifa that says a Tanai can help is talking about what?
The Sukkah, the Alma, regular structure.
Right. Asa'an means it brings us to a new case. It brings us into a new case of Sukkah Da'alma. What's a Sukkah Da'alma?
Regular structure.
Regular Sukkah, like we said before, on Pesach or Shavuos. A hut, right? A gazebo, right? Where you like to have your meals because it's airy and cool, right? But not with the Kedusha of a mitzvah. But what would be if it was talking about a Sukkah that had the Kedusha of a mitzvah?
The Sukkah, the mitzvah, Sukkah belong to the Kedusha of mitzvah, Lo Mahani Ba Tanai.
Right. That's the conclusion of Rab Menashe Breda Rava. It really is true. If it would have been a regular Sukkah of Sukkahs, you're right, a Tanai wouldn't help. Why? Because it's Hektish. Like Rabbi Akiva said, like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira said. The Torah wants it to be Hektish. You can't come along with your Tanai and stop it. It's like trying to stop a locomotive with a bird. Right? You can't. So that's the Gemora's conclusion right now. Now we started a new section before, which we have 2 minutes to continue. That it says what? You want to try it, Shabbatai?
V'sokalat mitzvah. Lo.
Lo? No tennis today?
But how do you know that's a question?
Because we just repeated before. It's the 3rd time on the page we had the same thing. When it's a repetition, it's alerting you that we're not examining something that was said before. So if before we said it as a statement, probably this is a question. And then, you know what seals the argument?
Hey, Netanya.
That's right. Because you see what's up the sleeve. It's up its sleeve to bring a Beitsa. But didn't we learn the Beitsa not like that?
So that's the question.
That's right. The hey makes it into a question that together with the lo, I know the lo is a rhetorical question. So could the mitzvah lo? Vatanya, but didn't we learn in the Beitsa that yes, that you can make it tonight to stop Kedusha? And then we have the whole list of all these things that went into the sukkah of this fellow who made his sukkah with all these ornaments. And once he put the ornaments up, they became part of the sukkah. So even if you put up a cluster of grapes as an ornament in the sukkah, it says at the end of the Beitsa, Asur li stapik mehem. Let's skip down a touch. Asur li stapik mehem. It says you can't take any usage. You can't use. Li stapik means to use. You can't use any of these things. You can't reach up and take a little grape because you have a cheshek to eat a grape in the middle of sukkahs. Why? Because it's now part of the sukkah, and we said anything part of the sukkah becomes hektish. So that part stems with what we learned before. Okay, but then we're going to see that a Tanai helps. So then hopefully tomorrow we'll see this point that we thought a Tanai couldn't help, but now it's going to say a Tanai does help, so what's going on?